Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bundy.
Here.
Commissioner Lee. Here. Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
And
Jennifer Friedman will not be here tonight, and Peter Chase, our chair, will be here late. So I'll
So in
just
the
get
meantime,
started.
Vice Chair Metcalf will be chairing the meeting.
Okay. We'll open up with public comment. Is there anyone who has a comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to the first hearing, which is 1702 Redwood Highway, The Village. The Charles Schwab, I guess you'd call it modification of the facade across from the Gap. Is there somebody here to represent that? Okay, and would you start with the staff report, please, Doug?
So this is a design review application for a new tenant moving into a space at the Village. This is for Charles Schwab offices at both the lower and the upper level of the space highlighted here. 1702 Redwood Highway. The zoning is C2, Regional Shopping District, and the site is also governed by the tenant design guidelines that are referred to in the staff report. I'll show a number of pictures of the facade and the kind of existing conditions and the proposed. What we're looking at here is primarily changes to windows, addition of new signage, and changes to materials along the facade. There's no site work being performed, and it's strictly limited to really aesthetic changes. So we'll go through some of those here. And I did take some photos today that were obscured by the smoke, so you'll see that here. So this is looking at the southeast elevation, which is this is one of the primary entrances to the Village. It's across from the Gap, and you see here from the parking lot. This is a full set of plans. Obviously, was given to each of the commissioners to review, and this is the existing elevation there, as we saw in the photo. There's demolition notes shown throughout the plan, kind of showing what exists now. A number of these windows will be removed to make way for signage. And new materials, as specified in the staff report, will be introduced, including a stone veneer, stained redwood, cedar siding, and new paint colors as well. There's quite a heavy color materials board here if you want to take a look at that.
Weighs
And
as much as this, right?
there's also some color materials of the interior, although that's not within the scope tonight, but to give a little context for how the design ties together. Those were provided. All right. Give you a moment to take a look there. And each of these is labeled, and those labels are also shown on the proposed elevations, so you can get a sense of where each of those materials is going. As you see here on the lower floor, that stone veneer will cover a majority of that surface. They'll be simply repairing the lap siding that's there today and repainting it with the white that you see there. And then they're using, which I'll show in the renderings in just a moment here, they're using the darker kind of gray for portions of it to kind of create some visual relief on the facade. Mm-hmm. So here also you see the proposed new signage here. As shown in the staff report, both of the signs will be illuminated. The size of the signage is to be in relation to the facade and the size of the tenant space as specified in the design criteria, which operates as a master sign program. So there's no specific size, minimum or maximum size specified in those tenant design criteria. So it's up to the commission and up to staff to make that determination as to whether the signage is appropriate for the site. But all the signs will use dimmers, timers, and the color temperature of the lighting is limited, I believe, to 3,500 Kelvin. Those are both specified on the plans and are also conditions of approval in the attached resolution. And then here is the rendering. Give it a little more punch. So as you can see, it's really a matter of updating the colors, using that gray for that middle portion to try to provide some visual relief. The addition of the stone veneer all along the lower portion, maintaining the windows all along the lower level, removal of a couple windows at the upper floor to, provide location for the signage. Now focusing on what is, I believe, sort of the southern or southwestern elevation here. Again, they'll be using both the upper and the lower floor, so they've tried to use a design that ties together those elements to show and clearly signify that the space is occupied by one common tenant. So they'll be removing some of the facade here, as we'll see, on the upper floor. Adding signage over that portion as well. This is similar to a number of other locations that have multiple elevations that face different parts of the village, where you have signage on both the main entry and then also facing the interior courtyard, like the Gap. I have some photos just to give examples. Here again is that perspective. Again, this is subject to the design review findings. The same findings that are applicable to residential review are also applicable to the commercial review here, and all those findings have to be made. One of the findings that I would just highlight that isn't always as much of a consideration is the signage, which is finding 8, where the design and location of signs are consistent with the character and scale of the buildings to which they're attached, and are visually harmonious with surrounding development. Staff believes these findings can be made for this project. The materials are fresh. They're a good update. They'll be repairing the materials that have aged over time, kind of improving the appearance of the facade, providing a welcoming entrance to the village, and that staff believes the signage is in proportion to the entrances, and it's quite similar in proportion to the facade as like the Gap signage or the other signage that's in the vicinity. Just to provide a little more kind of context here, this is what it looks like from the farthest extent of the parking lot. Obviously the public roadway is a bit further than this, but it just kind of highlights sort of the minimal visibility of this from the public right-of-way. So this is much more about sort of a pedestrian scale experience of folks who are entering the mall and viewing this updated tenant space. So I have some additional photos here just to kind of show the context, again with the Gap store there. 2 signs are being shown there on the lower left and on the upper portion, and then again just kind of showing this new some of the new outside seating that's there in the central court area, and how that sort of relates with this. But again, it's a fairly simple project that's updating materials and providing updates necessary to accommodate a new tenant. So staff believes all the design review findings can be made, and that this is consistent with the tenant design criteria for the village, and recommends approval of the project. And there's an attached resolution for approving the project. And happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions, Charles?
I had just a quick question. So, in the elevations, there's a few areas that are defined as area not in scope, but in the renderings, it actually shows that it changes from that kind of peach color to a dark gray, black. And so, is that being picked up by another project, or is it going to be existing to remain, and it'll remain that peach? So it's not. It's the one where it's this facade. Yeah. So do you know the answer to that, or should I ask the applicant?
I believe so. Some of the notes on here, like the signage, a separate scope. There's some things here that sort of are a little bit confusing, because like with the signage it says it's separate scope, but obviously it's being reviewed under this application. As far as the paint color go, I'd have to refer to on the proposed elevation.
So yeah, so it's those two elevations on the wall, the ones that are down below.
The one on the left-hand side?
Yeah, down below that one. So,
No, on the right. You're talking about the one on the far
yeah,
right.
so on the far right, see how it shows dark gray, and then that elevation,
Yeah.
it shows that the area is not in scope. But in looking at the existing photos, it looks like it's a different tenant. So
Yeah, portions are a different tenant.
Okay.
I'll ask.
Why don't we have the applicant explain
Okay, I'll ask the
that?
applicant then.
Okay.
Yeah, but as far as the colors, there is some inconsistency in that. I don't know how much of that is shading and rendering, or, just differences between those perspectives and what's shown. But as far as what would be approved tonight, there's the two colors that are shown on
there.
that correspond to the numbers and the labels on the plans. So I can say that there's no colors different than super white and ocean floor, which are those
Okay.
two that are being proposed. But still, question remains,
Okay.
there's some inconsistency between them.
Bob, do you have any questions?
just-
Oh, did you have more?
No, that was all, just trying
We'll wait
to
for
understand
the-
the
and
rendering
then the
versus the
applicant.
elevation.
Good. Bob, do you have any questions of staff?
Now, the cedar siding, is this stain part of this at all, or is this just an example of the replacement pieces?
So that is an example of the stained cedar siding that would be used in soffits.
Oh, that's the
and
soffit.
doorways and, as minor,
okay.
minor
Okay.
kind of framing details.
Okay.
But the actual siding on the majority of the outside of it would either be the stone veneer or painted siding.
Right, gotcha. The other question I had, it looks like on the little balcony that's a design feature of the original building, that there's eliminating any windows or door to that. And I noticed that there's a fire fixture, fire pipe out there, and it looks like it's set up for the fire department to get access to that. Is that being moved or something done with that?
I don't believe there's any modifications to the function of that balcony. None have been specified in the plans
But,
as far as the
I mean,
access
has
to
the
it.
fire department weighed in on whether eliminating any door or access to the building
They would-
from that balcony would
So-
impact the ability of that fire stand to be used to provide fire protection?
Yeah, I think when these plans move toward building permits, submittal stage, they'll be reviewed by fire for compliance and maintaining proper access. I actually don't know how many of the windows are actually functional versus just kind of design features, but that would be reviewed by the fire department as part of the building's
Okay.
permit submittal.
The other thing, the signs did seem to be a little bit on the side of sort of a big-ass sign, and I wondered how big the gap sign was.
Yeah, I don't have specifics on that, but I can get that for you certainly. That's-
Okay.
Okay, is that it, Bob?
And the signage, is there a limit as how many lumens are projected that we would ask them to dim that down to?
There is not, but there certainly can be, and one of the conditions of approval requires that staff go out and assess the lighting.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why we require dimmers, so that we
Yeah.
can kind of actively.
Okay.
And the times
Assess that.
are listed in there too.
Correct. And I believe
one
it's
has to be dimmed.
11 PM or end of business hours, whichever is later.
And I think it's 3,000,
That's Kelvin.
the kelvins. Okay, I just have one question, has to do with signage, which might be more appropriate for the applicant, but I'll ask you. Looking at the two drawings over here on the far right, the lower one is a very attractive, modern-looking sign. The other one is kind of old-fashioned stuff. I just find the bottom one far more attractive, and I'm wondering if they would consider using that same look on, I guess it would be the outside, the part that faces the parking lot.
So using identical signage for the interior and the
Yes,
exterior.
rather than the blue. I realize that that's kind of their logo and stuff, but since they're changing it on the inside, why not on the outside? It would not be so obtrusive as the
Maybe the-
blue and all the other colors that way, so talk to the applicant. Who is going to speak for the applicant? Would you please come on up and introduce yourself? And you'll have 15 minutes to present.
Good evening. I'm Mary Morrison. I'm the
That may not be on.
Good evening. I'm Mary Morrison. I'm the Senior Design Manager with Charles Schwab, and we thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. We've been a member of the Corte Madera community now for decades, and we're very excited to have the opportunity to consolidate our operations over at the village and have our team be better able to serve your community by being under one roof instead of 4 locations currently. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I did specifically want to address the first floor condition because Schwab is all about transparency, and I noted earlier in the staff report, it stated that we are taking the entire first floor. That, in fact, is not the case. We are taking a portion of the first floor. We are taking the portion of the first floor that faces the parking lot and a small portion of the southern. So the, if you don't mind if I come up. It's just- So we are,
This elevation?
so this elevation, we are the upper floor. We are not the lower floor. Mace Rich, for confidentiality reasons, has not revealed to us who that tenant is, will be my
Okay.
So therefore.
Excuse me, would you wait 1 minute? Our chair has arrived, and we'll give him a chance to get settled, and then he can hear your presentation.
Excuse me for late. Medical procedure.
And don't try to lift that, just slide it. You'll, oh, you can take your mic. Our meetings get recorded, so we need to use the microphone. This is the presentation on Charles Schwab. Okay.
Let me know when you're ready and I'll.
Okay.
Okay. So I wanted to provide some clarification that there will be another tenant of whom Schwab has not been advised who that tenant might be, what their facade might look like. And so Mace Rich has provided kind of a delineating line for us to work above. What happens below on this facade is between your team, Mace Rich, the new tenant. Correct, yes, so we come back to here, thank you. And then any reference to peach, I am afraid is just a printing or shading condition. There is absolutely no intention to have any peach or any color other than the 2
Right.
on the exterior.
Well, yeah, so is it okay? So I guess my thing is that lower portion, you don't know what it's going to be in the future, but if we approve the design, at least in the, I think it's clear in the elevation that that's out of scope and that I can understand it, but in the rendering, it's dark gray and it's not what I see in the existing condition, so it reads as a uniform design, which is great
Understood.
because it gives us a better concept of what we all wish it could be, but it isn't what we're going to approve on that side, right?
Understood.
So I just needed to point that out.
Oh, sure, no, and I
understand that
wanted
that's
to
truly
be
what I was
clear.
looking at.
I
so-
wanted to be clear, we
yeah,
are not
so-
taking that
So that's
small
fine, I
piece.
mean, and thank you
Sure.
for explaining the deeper,
Sure.
kind of negotiations that are going on in that area
Sure.
for that facade.
No problem.
Would you like to address the signage that I asked about?
Definitely. So as you mentioned very astutely, the blue square is our primary word mark and logo, and that is our first choice of word mark for our retail, print, TV, all types of media. The reason we have the linear sign in the back is that in evaluating the aesthetics of the building, it was deemed more appropriate that the linear word mark would work better and be more cohesive on that side. If we were to do anything, we would propose to do the blue square on both facades.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Are there any other questions I can answer?
Why don't you?
In any of the windows, maybe this question's already been asked, there will be no electronic lighting in behind any of the windows, is that correct?
There is illuminated signage proposed behind this elevation, and it's shown here in the rendering. A large Own Your Tomorrow is mounted, I believe it's about 2 feet behind the window.
What is it?
It's, so part of our brand is Owning Your Tomorrow. And so it's a glass wall that has frosting with an Own Your Tomorrow verbiage mounted upon it. So much like a retailer would have a store display window, that's our store display window.
Is that part of the interior package, or is that?
It is part of the interior package because it's, under the signage code, it's not deemed as exterior signage.
Phyllis?
Peter and I have had problems with this type of interior lighting. That's why we're smiling at each other. I assume from what you're saying with your colors and your logos, the writing's going to be in blue?
No, the Own Your Tomorrow is not in blue.
Okay.
What color will that be?
Yes.
I believe it's white. It's typically black or white. I'm sorry, I'd have to read the drawing.
And it will be shut off at night when you are closed?
Yes, all illumination is on timers and dimmers for the signage.
Okay, because we are, as I said, not with Schwab, but we are having some problems with some interior lighting that is not being shut off. And it's also hot pink, so.
Appreciate that.
And
First 2 pages.
is it really necessary to be lit during the day even?
We did some studies, and with the amount of glare on the glazing, it's really not possible to see much unless it were really mounted on that glazing. And we wanted to be respectful and purposeful to our mission, that we're not in your face. We are there to serve our client in a meaningful and in a meaningful way that, identifies us, identifies our mission, but not in your face.
What if the lettering was just on the back wall without any lighting? And you could make it black? I assume you can have interior white or off-white walls.
Oh, definitely. It won't be, we did the studies and it just won't be visible. I think that we would pass on it altogether versus spending any money for something, because the whole purpose is the entire purpose is for it to be seen from the pedestrian level during daytime and nighttime, since it's a retail center.
Well, nighttime,
So-
the lights are supposed to be off when you're closed.
Well, but we're open past 5 in winter, and so it does get dark early, so.
Well, we don't have control over the interior packaging because we've been discussing the strict signage limitation that's in our current sign code. We can't say no to it, strictly speaking. So, because it's not affixed to the exterior of the building, it's within the interior of the building. But I think that we would condition this, that it goes off when the store shuts down or at 8 o'clock.
Absolutely, we would agree to that,
It has to
definitely.
be, it has to be that.
That's no issue.
Yeah, okay. How you doing, Dr. Bundy? Any questions further for you?
Yeah, Mary. So one of the things I was concerned about in going into the courtyard and looking at it was just looking around at the other buildings, all of which are 1 story, and then this is 2 story. And stated in Mace Rich is one of the goals is to make this welcoming, make this pedestrian friendly. And one of the other things is to create some architectural interest. And there's some architectural interest that's there now. Certainly the siding is a little worn and, things need to be updated, but you're taking off this facade on the southwest facing building and, really having, it's a very simple look, but it does seem, sort of a corporate look, but this is a corporate building, but it seems much different than the other building facades in the village. And I'm concerned that we're taking away some visual interest that's there, something that breaks up that long wall, and not really replacing it with something that has that much appeal or is that inviting. And I guess I'm also a little concerned that now that we're learning that that entrance on that southwest side isn't an entrance to Charles Schwab, and that there's going to be somebody else that comes in and is going to require signage and consideration about how their entrance looks. What were the architect trying to design in taking that off and giving us just more of a monotonous wall, and also the windows? We seem to be losing some interest in those with the awnings and the mullions on that. What is the goal of the architect?
So
for this?
our goal with this facade was, because we don't know who this tenant is. We don't know what their design intent, what their brand is. We don't know anything about them. And our concern was that if we left a similar type of detail intact, something that really created a cohesive storefront, that our clients would then be entering this tenant and become frustrated, annoyed, have to go around the corner. So we really tried to create a very simple demarcation that would allow the future tenant below us to do something significant with their brand, since it likely will be their only entrance. And it's why we included the linear word mark to represent that we are here in this linear second floor space to serve them.
Well, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding, there's still an entrance that people are going to have to realize to go to Charles Schwab. They're going to have to go around to the eastern side of the building.
Correct. However, we felt that this type of continuous element really made it seem like a cohesive, owned by one company, as it was with Banana. And so we felt that, and also in speaking with Mace Rich, they very much created a dividing line for us to work above and the other tenant to have ownership of what is below. So
I'm not seeing very much of a dividing line. I understand there's going to be a soffit that is just a painted board going across.
correct, until that tenant comes in, and then they may provide, a substantial portal or some type of horizontal element that would delineate their entrance. And then I just wanted to reference that the Gap building across the way is very similar. It is also two-story.
Oh, I didn't realize the Gap was 2 stories. The one architectural interest on the building is that balcony, and it seems like by taking out the windows and the doors, there's going to be no access to the balcony. Is that correct?
The balcony was originally a part of the tower structure and a part of the fire exiting for the space. The tower, my understanding is that it was no longer deemed appropriate for exiting, and therefore, perhaps that and other reasons, was removed. We did all of our studies. It's no longer required as a fire exit. And Mace Rich agreed that we don't really have purpose for a balcony. We can, talk about perhaps treating the actual railing differently, but it's not, it was a utilitarian feature and it's an obsolete feature.
I guess I was
With the
looking
tower
at it
gone.
as it would be a feature of interest to break up the wall a little bit, and either you might put a table and umbrella out there for employees to have lunch, or you could just put some planting or statuary or something out there that would create a little bit more of interest. Was that thought about in the whole process?
We have some risk management issues with allowing employees access to outdoor spaces above certain elevation. We also have issues with our retail locations not having the personnel available in bad weather to remove small patio furniture. Umbrellas fly at very high rates of speed, as do tables and chairs. And we just don't have staff to take them in every night or, be watching the weather during the day as we do at our corporate locations, where we certainly have site furnishings and bike racks and all those kinds of things. So, no, we
Okay.
did not have a purpose for a balcony.
The windows that are going to be replaced, and is that frosted also, or?
No, they're clear.
Okay, and will they have shades underneath them?
They
or
will have
behind?
shades because of the western exposure, and they are private offices all against that western facade and the sun and the glare on computers. So, yes, there will be shades on those.
Okay.
Interior,
Solar shades.
yes. Well, not solar, they'll be manual shades.
Phyllis?
Yes. This is more for Bob than you. The reason there was the door and the balcony, the entranceway, is because of having the tower. And that, at the time the center was built, was considered to be an upstairs entrance. You can walk from the tower across in there, and it became a problem with protecting merchandise, shall I say, and having merchandise not leave that you did not plan on having leave. And, towers are somewhat passé as far as the centers go. It was a big thing in the 80s. There's been things written about being an earthquake country, that they're not exactly the safest things to have. That was the only reason for it. It was, yes, people could leave as a fire exit, just from the second floor at that time, but the whole purpose of it was really for ingress and egress to the store itself. And I don't know if that what the original store was. I see no reason to maintain it, and I think that design really fits in with the designs that we're seeing today. As I say, the one thing that I'd like to see the Charles Schwab sign over there. I don't mind having Schwab underneath Charles. I'd like to see it done with the dark gray or black lettering and without the blue. I just find it to be far more attractive, but that's just a personal opinion. But the design itself, I think, works. I find it to be very attractive. I think the materials look very good. And do you have any idea of when Macerich is going to have another tenant? Is it something they're working on now, or? Oh, okay.
I haven't been privy to
They
those
are.
conversations, and
Is there any reason that whatever this tenant wants, when we all find out who it is, could interfere with that design? Do we have to wait to approve this design for the business that will be sharing the building to come in with their ideas?
Well, it's an interesting question because, as you know, in the tenant design guidelines, those interior-facing facades actually aren't reviewed. They go straight for building permit as long. And remember, this all goes through Macerich, and then the Macerich architects and as well confirm compliance with the tenant design guidelines. So this has been reviewed by Macerich. the interior front, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the interior facing storefronts, such as the one that's going to just be facing the interior courtyard there, will not be reviewed by the planning commission. Will be reviewed by Macerich and the town and staff to
staff.
conformance with the design guidelines.
Yeah, and if there's any, so this application has a specific scope and a specific area that it applies to, which are shown, there's areas that are shown as outside of, responsibility of the management, et cetera. If there was an application for that new tenant space, they would, obviously need to integrate into what's there. So if you approve what's proposed tonight and there's a future application,
it's their
by
application.
virtue of the design criteria, it would need to integrate well into that. So,
And Schwab was there
Yeah.
with the design first, so there's no problem.
I mean, just in the sense that there is what is under consideration tonight, and there are those things which are outside that scope that will come in the future.
One more thing, that facade that you were told about, the peach in the center there, the one that you're still, right. That really was part of the design that worked in with the tower, which no longer exists. Part of the line mimicked some of the stuff from the design of the tower.
Yeah, that would be my comment, is reevaluating the facade in
Yes.
general, because the context in which it was designed has now been removed.
Right.
And the fact that it's this kind of postmodern piece of facade, and we're
Yeah.
trying to update to a more current condition, a more minimalist aesthetic,
Right.
right? I think it, and I drew a little diagram. Thank you for explaining what the design was trying to do with that upper band. It's as though it's a kind of chevroned beginning. It peels and wraps around as a facade, sits on top of another block of program. I think the renderings, I didn't quite get that until you explained it, and then I understand that this thing will read as one uniform band as you walk around, irrespective of what's happening below it.
It's very handsome.
Yeah, I think it's a nice contemporary design move, so thank you.
All right, so, Bob,
Some other question on was the Macerich guidelines about warm earth tone colors, and this is a very stark white finish. I don't believe there's any really bright white finish on some of the other buildings that are there.
Bob, can
Pottery
we go back to the
Barn.
picture of the
Yeah.
two? Because I think Gap is actually white as well.
Gap has some white elements
Very
with
white. It's all
dark
metal.
gray. Pottery Barn, while not on the parking lot side, is completely bright white.
White, yes.
So the other question was regarding the stone veneer. It seems to stop at one corner rather than continuing to wrap around, say, as far as the door.
So we wrapped it to the, we wrapped it here and to this edge. And then it becomes kind of this difficult transition because there are mace-rich elements that we don't control what happens with them, the hydration station, the ATM. This, I believe, was an elevator somewhere. One of these two was an elevator. So we stopped the stone element so that it has a clear demarc. This is Schwab, this is someone else, even though we may be on the interior of that space.
Bob, I'll say, it appears that it's on the very far right.
It works.
Yeah,
Right, and it extends over to the side.
Yeah.
so it's
It extends
a
to the
series of
windows.
pilasters around the building, essentially, around the renovation. I mean, you have it left to right in pilasters or vertical pieces. Yeah. Phyllis, you were going to say something else?
No, I was just saying that I think the design works. I think the design is good, and I would like to see us approve it.
So we haven't gone to, Bob, you have another question? Yes.
Sorry. I just came from a conference on the state of the San Francisco estuary, and there were some even more extreme concerns about sea level rise in the future. And this is in the flood zone, although just barely in the flood zone. And I would ask the architect if they would think about incorporating a dry floodproofing technique for the entrances to the building, because I think your windows are protected at the lower level, and it would only require basically brackets that would hold a waterproof barrier that would be put in manually if ever needed. I mean, it's unlikely that we're going to have flooding, but we are dependent on levees and pumps, and in the event of a catastrophic failure of either, there potentially could be flooding in the area. So was that something that the architect considered?
We did not give that consideration, as we were just a small portion of the first floor, and it really, other than some minor exterior modifications, it's primarily a tenant improvement project. Also, being Charles Schwab, we have a huge specific business resumption and continuity plan for each and every location that is specific to that location. So should something catastrophic happen, you can take the fires in Napa and everywhere right now. We have the ability to redirect all that business within the rest of our system. So we did not put any real weight towards flood.
I was going to suggest if Bob's concern should probably be addressed by Macerich and the management group over at Town Center, the other one, rather than speak to the individual tenants, and some will do it and some will not. I think it has to do with the shopping center itself and not individual tenants would be the proper way to look at it. Because what is it, it's about 70% of the town is in a flood zone.
What was our first floor elevation here, Bob, or do you know, of this project? What is that one? 10 point something? We don't know. Okay, close. All right. So in any case, well,
But nothing is being changed.
That's a worthwhile comment. Adam,
Well, I
you
would just say, if we haven't already, the Public Works Department will, if required, will require a floodplain development permit. I think this may be a consideration for voluntary, sort of doing that as a voluntary measure, given that Macerich as a whole, you basically do it as this whole building and structure, and obviously as a percentage of the improvements of that entire structure, it's not going to meet I doubt it meets the 50% requirement, but I think what I'm hearing is can it be done as a voluntary measure?
Right. I'm asking if they would consider doing that, being as the cost of doing it at this point is very minimal, and potentially would allow the Charles Schwab to stay dry in the event of flooding, which is tidal, and as the tidal goes back out, you're back in business. You're not having to redirect.
So Sheila is my construction manager. Yes, we would be happy to consider it. Our budgets go through extensive executive financial approvals. As far as I know, this project budget has already been established and approved. So if it did not result in any additional cost or delay to the project, we certainly would be happy to consider it. But if we have to go back and get executive council approval for it, I can't commit to what their reaction might be.
Adam, is Phyllis's comment that this is a Macerich element that should be put upon them to consider or
to discuss.
Well, I'm sure they would opine on any individual tenant wanting to install this,
Right.
And that would be part of the consideration. As a requirement, yes. I mean, it's not going to be an individual tenant responsibility in a shopping center like this, because of the structures themselves involve many more tenants than just one.
Right.
But again, I think this is a different request that Commissioner Bundy is asking. And yes, there are other considerations, but you're hearing the response right now from
Right.
the.
So this particular floor elevation, is it above the rest of the shops that dropped down? Because it seems to me there was a grade change that was somewhat incorporated into the paving out there, or is it all on the same grade?
There is some difference in elevation throughout the shopping center.
Right.
I think this may be one of the higher portions, but I think in the last year or so, when the FEMA maps were updated, you know,
Yeah, it falls
further
in.
proportion
Right.
was falling under that, yeah.
This section was higher because then the tower was on it. Remember, you went up a couple of steps to where the entrance to the tower was, and then it leveled off walking out towards where the parking
So
was.
that could be
So this
a-
is at a higher elevation than most.
One, it's a public works consideration. Two, it's a question to Macerich to see if they're willing to do that. I understand why it's not a part of design now, and it's not a part of a requirement from the town at this point. unless-
Right, not a requirement, but
Right,
again,
okay.
it can be done on a voluntary basis
Right.
if accepted by the applicant.
That would
haven't
be
gone
part of
to,
the approval.
All right, so we haven't gone to public comment yet on this?
No.
We haven't, but those are all the questions for, I'm sorry, I'm late, so I didn't get your name.
My name is Mary Morrison, and I'm a
Okay.
senior manager with the corporate real estate group at Schwab.
I need to make a declaration that I don't know you, I've never met you, but my partner knows you, Victoria Sandvik.
Oh.
So, but it does not influence my decision.
Okay, very good.
She, 25 years there, so, anyway, in any case. So, let's say that having no more questions for the applicant, that at 10 to 8, we open it for public comment, if there is any public comment.
There's no public.
So, we're good, all right, so we will close the public comment section on this and bring it back here for discussion. So, Phyllis, your thoughts?
I can make the findings. I like the design. I think it will be an improvement at that space. I am delighted to see that the tower is gone and any remnants of design that fit in with it will be gone. And I would like to move for approval after we discuss it.
Okay. Dr. Bundy?
I feel the design could use some more work, and the entrance on the southwest side, where the facade element, breaks up the wall, if that, needs to be replaced with something different, I think it should have some more interest. I guess I'd like to see them rethink doing something with the balcony to create some interest, something that looks like it's nice there without imperiling the employees. The windows just seem to be rather stark, and I would wonder about having some shading or something to break that up a little bit. So I'm not, I think this needs some work.
Charles?
Yeah, I think, and I can make the findings. My only consideration is, I know it's outside of your scope, but in the renderings you show the dark gray down below. And my only hope is if they don't have a plan for that new retail for a while, that they let you just slather some gray paint down below to bring some uniformity to the concept, and they don't just allow that little peach piece to hang. Not that we can make that part of the project, but that's just I think that was, I like it better like that, so hopefully we can get it to that point. That's all I had to say.
We'll ask Dan to buy the paint.
So I think that this is a uniform renovation to the building is in keeping with the updating of the center, and I like the clean architectural lines of it. And I think that it does the right thing to the balcony, despite what Bob has to say about it. I like the fact that it's a good roof line, and I like the stone addition, and I like its cleanliness. I think it represents a brand very well, and I think it's a good renovation. The sign is in the right place to be seen for as long as it will be seen. So I would be able to make the findings for this project as it's presented, I think. So So that said,
Okay.
hearing 3 out of 4, so if anybody wants to make a motion on this one.
I'll make a motion. In the matter of design review application number PL 2017-077-A, a public hearing for proposed facade modifications and new signage for Charles Schwab offices at 1702 Redwood Highway in the Village Shopping Center, resolution number 17-020.
I second the motion.
Commissioner Bundy,
No.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Vice Chair Metcalf,
Aye.
Chairman Chase.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
And will you read the appeal, please, Mr. Bush?
Following action by the Planning Commission at a public hearing or meeting, any decision of the Planning Commission may be appealed to the Town Council within 10 calendar days. Appeal forms are available at the Planning Department, and a $300 filing fee is required.
Thank you very much.
Doug, while we're waiting, how come you got a small size set, and we got the large economy size? Not fair. Print one for me next time.
Well, our eyesight's getting bad, so besides that. All right, we're ready to go on to 62 Granada Drive, a design review application for the remodel of a 2,052 square foot two-story residence, including a 535 square foot addition to the upper floor at 62 Granada Drive. So, I guess I know who's going to make this presentation. Mr. Bush.
All right, so here we have a residential remodel project with an addition to an existing second floor. This is on 62 Granada Drive, as shown here in the vicinity map. To the east is the, what is that called? It's a
It's a former Granada
Yeah.
Elementary School.
which is now the home to a number of children's schools and related uses.
Leased out.
Yeah, and then surrounding the project are other homes built in the same subdivision at the same time, many of which have identical floor plans, which we'll go into in just a moment here. The topography of the site, it slopes downward from the south, as shown here, down to the north, down toward the bay. Each home is on a relatively level graded building pad and steps down as you go down the street from 66 Granada down to 58, shown here. The applicant did provide letters of support and did their own outreach to neighbors and provided letters of support, I believe, from both 66, the southern neighbor, 58, the northern neighbor, and I believe 61 across the street as well. Staff did not receive any letters of objection or any further comments from, in response to the public notice that was sent out by the department. So this is a 6,300 square foot lot, a bit smaller than the standard lot size, but fairly typical for this neighborhood. The existing house meets all the required setbacks, and all of the proposal here meets all the floor area ratio, lot coverage, all the standards for the R1 district. As you can see here, the addition would increase the height by, I think, 2 feet 8 inches, increase the floor area as well, again, not requiring a variance and meeting all the required development standards. I stole this from Google Maps just to provide kind of a perspective that otherwise would not be available to us. That just kind of, again, highlights the topography of the neighborhood and kind of how each home steps down the slope here. It seems like a fairly standard condition here that these homes do not have views toward the ocean so much as they have kind of an orientation to the east and the west. The upper neighbor shown here, 66 Granada, does not have any windows looking to the north. And let's see. So just to go through a couple of the existing photos to get the lay of the land, the story poles were erected as required at least 2 weeks ahead of this hearing, and a certification letter from a surveyor was provided confirming that the location and the height of the story poles are accurate representation of what's being proposed in the plans. So as you can see here, this will be in addition to the southern portion of the house. It's already a 2-story design, as are many of these in this immediate vicinity. They have sort of a dormer window over a portion of the house, while the portion over the garage is just a single story. There's some significant vegetation separating this from the upslope neighbor, as shown here. And looking from across the street here again, here's some significant vegetation and landscaping. A new landscaping plan is not provided with these plans. The objective is to maintain the existing mature landscaping. And staff believes that that is entirely possible given the location of the project, that none of this vegetation need be disturbed as part of the construction. Again, looking to the northeast here, showing the location of the proposed addition. So this would be a second floor addition that would provide area for a master suite, a master bedroom, master bathroom over the garage there. This is the upslope neighbor at 66 Granada, again showing kind of a variation of that design with the dormer, a little bit of a different roof kind of design there. Kind of moving down the street, here's another neighbor at 58 Granada with a similar design. And here's an example of a home, presumably, which was also changed from the original floor plan, being that it's the only one that I could find in the neighborhood that looked exactly like this. But this shows sort of the extension of that dormer, the expansion of it, and the addition of another dormer as well to kind of expand upon that existing space, make use of some of the attic space. Just another example of kind of one of the homes that's changed in the neighborhood. Some other examples of design in the immediate vicinity. And obviously you have the plans are a little bit larger that are in front of you in the packets that were provided to you, but I just wanted to provide copies of these for reference if there's any specific questions on them. But this just kind of shows that there's existing first and second floor. It shows how the upper floor is limited to just the northern portion, and the proposal here is to make use of the southern portion of the upper floor here. So this is showing both a rendering of what that looks like from the street elevation, as well as the proposed floor plan, which again includes that master bath, large closet, and the master bedroom. So there's been clearly some significant effort here to sort of mimic the existing architecture and to try to integrate well into the existing roof line. It's increasing somewhat in height, providing some articulation to kind of provide, to maybe escape the monotony of a consistent roof pitch across the whole entirety of the upper floor. This is both looking on the upper level here, the west elevation is looking from the street. The east elevation would be from the backyard, and due to the topography of the lot in relation to the Granada School would not be easily visible from any other neighboring properties, really. So there are windows that look out to the east and that look out to the west, not creating any privacy or other impacts on neighboring properties due to the location of the addition. Here is looking at the south elevation. This is how it may appear from the upper neighbor at 66 Granada. Again, there's a number of windows that were added along that upper elevation on the top right here. They don't extend as low as some of the other windows in the home to kind of limit some of the privacy impacts or any potential privacy impacts. The upper neighbor at 66 Granada does not have any windows facing the north elevation, so this is not expected to create any privacy impacts. Due to the topography of the lots and being that 66 Granada is above this property, it also does not create a situation where these windows would look down on that neighboring yard or into their home. Again, and this is the north elevation, just kind of showing showing that addition, which is on the southern portion of the house, so it's significantly stepped back. So when you're looking from the north elevation, when you're looking from that northern neighbor, you're not only downslope from this property, but you're also, I believe over 40 feet away from where this addition would go. So again, not creating any significant concerns for privacy, looking down on that neighbor into their yard, and no significant impacts on shading or sunlight impacts either, given the setback from that property. I think these perspectives, again, kind of speak to the integration of this proposed addition and how there is not only a setback from that sort of front roof line and that front elevation to create that articulation, but also mimicking the roof pitch, providing the articulation of the roof peak there. And just in staff's opinion, this integrates very well into the existing design and is an attractive addition that works well both on this site in the context of the existing vegetation, the existing architecture of the home, as well as neighboring properties, and even looking as far as trends in the neighborhood as far as how others have improved their homes. This is very consistent with that pattern, and staff believes that given the lack of really any significant impacts and any impacts at all on neighboring properties, this is an example of a project that's done well and with sensitivity, both in terms of design as well as working well with neighboring properties, both as from an aesthetic standpoint and also just I guess, working with the neighbors and doing something that works for everybody. So it's nice to be able to say that and support the project. And yeah, staff believes all the findings can be made and recommends approval of the project. There is both the letters of support provided by the neighbors that were included in the packet, as well as a colored materials board with actual paint chips, and the paint obviously will be updated. There's a number of materials that are called out in the staff report. I'm able to answer any questions, or the applicant is here to answer any questions if you have those on the materials. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Again, this is a 541 square foot addition in total. 535 square feet is on the upper floor. And yeah, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Charles, do you have any questions for staff?
This is to understand story poles. Can you go back to the image that you'd taken of the story poles? Yeah, from the front.
Yeah.
So the goal of the story poles, is that only to show verticality? My only question is there is going to be a line that comes off of it over the front door, right? Would that usually show up in story poles? And not that it's illustrated in a lot of other ways in the project. It's more from my own understanding of the goal of the story poles. Would that be something?
Yeah,
that you,
generally speaking, because it's kind of, they can range from a minimal to very extreme detail in how much they kind of carve out all the edges of the proposed addition. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis as far as what, how much of those and which lines we want illustrated. But at minimum, it's to show the extent of the walls, how far they come out, the height, and the general shape of the roof peak. When in the context of view impacts, privacy impacts, and that, that's one of the ways that we're evaluating them.
Right. General massing, height, and location of building walls. And so something like that, I think, as Doug articulated also, it's a way to show impact. So something like architectural details oftentimes don't show up in those, where there's an ability to sort of easily visualize an extension of something to the extent that it's, again, not expanding the footprint of a home or something like that, case by case. But right, so it's a judgment, and we work with applicants to determine what's going to work for a particular project.
Thank you.
Just to add to that is that the story pole represents the wall and not the edge of the roof eave, and that this, of course, just doesn't have the red flags or fence, but we would like to see that. Dr. Bundy, any questions for
No.
the staff? All right, Phyllis.
I just think we have a typo here on page 2, under your section on background. The last one shows the Planning Commission holds a public hearing on September 12th.
Time warp. Yep,
Yeah,
that should read.
especially since the public hearing notices were sent out on the 29th.
Yeah, that's strange. You know, it is almost Halloween.
Yeah, that's okay.
So that should read October 10th.
Okay. Before I go into the designs, I think this is one of the best staff reports you've done, Doug. You really have gone into considerable detail, and I appreciate it. This is a very well-designed house. It fits into the neighborhood.
Do you,
The addition looks like it's been there. What?
Before we get into that, we want to hear from the applicant here,
Oh,
so,
okay.
and then we'll go into a couple of
Okay,
commentary things here,
Just
so.
trying to move the meeting
I
along.
know, that's it. So we have, I presume, an applicant here, and would you like to make a
You want me
presentation?
to move it here?
Small,
That's
he
what I told
says.
you, you don't want me in charge.
All right, so,
Hi, I'm Rich Pearlstein. I'm the architect for Amy Ross, the homeowner. I'm going to keep this really fast because unless you need more elaboration, briefly, I've lived in the neighborhood for almost 30 years. The neighborhood in the 60s was built as 2 models. It was a 1-story model that had a small master suite and 1,210 square feet. And the 2-story models, the 4-bedroom, 2 baths, didn't have a master suite. And that's been a very popular aspiration for people who bought the 2-story models. And I've done a few in the neighborhood, and this has been exactly Amy's goal. And I appreciate Commissioner Metcalf's comment about the kind of integration of the new with the existing. That was the intent when I work on these houses.
Beautiful.
I'd like to not have my additions look as though they've been glommed on, so that they're better integrated. I don't really need to say anything else unless you have questions.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Pearlstein?
I don't have any questions. I like the design, and it works.
Okay, Charles?
No questions.
All right. All right, at this moment,
he
we
can
open
do
it
it
up
too.
for a kidnapped member of the public.
Where's
We can
Jane
get
when we
somebody.
need her?
Right. So, we don't have public comments. We will close the public
Yes.
comment section and go right to deliberation.
Yes.
So, Charles?
Can I go back? Oh, I was going to finish my
So, I'll let-
deliberations.
you-
You,
I'm gonna steal all of your comments,
You look at
all of
me.
your compliments, should I say?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I really enjoy about this house, and that I think was done
Yes.
right in the neighborhood, and I'm glad that staff can say that, and I'm glad that I can say that. I think one of the things I really appreciated about this is, as you increase the 2nd-story mass, you take the verticality out of the siding and turn it to a horizontal read, which I think
Yes.
is really nice. I think that's a good move. And then the reason that in the story poles I wanted to see that roof line coming down is that's a nice addition. I think it's a way that ties it in where that doesn't, the whole addition doesn't stick out quite like it reads in the story
we lost
poles.
the picture.
But you had done such a good job of rendering it out that I get a really good sense of it. And so that's where all the different elements that go into representing the design so that the public and the planning commission can understand it come together to really tell the entire story. So kudos to that. And I also enjoy the color scheme. Client decision. Yeah. So it's a nice jewel box in the neighborhood, and I think it's a great addition. So I would be able to make all the findings.
All right, thank you. Dr. Bundy?
Nice job, Rich. Going to be a nice addition to the neighborhood.
And Phyllis?
Yes. Well, one thing I do like is the renderings from your firm actually look like the homes are going to, and not like something out of a Disney movie with butterflies flying around and acres of land. So we get a very good idea. Now, it works, and the fact that the slabs that they are on are the elevation going up the hill, in no way does that interfere with the next neighbor up, which I think is 68, 66. It's just very well done. It has met all the elements that are needed, as Charles mentioned, and he and I have talked about at other times. Changing it to horizontal boards from vertical boards does make a big difference in how the eye sees height. Colors are good. And it works. I certainly can support
Okay.
all the findings.
Great. I think that it is a well-designed change to a structure that needs it. A lot of them need it.
Yeah.
It'll take another 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years. But this is going to be nice over in that neighborhood. I think that your work and Doug's work is good for this project and would hold it to a standard. So let's take a vote on this project with a motion from somebody here.
I move we approve design review application PL-2017-0105 for the remodel of a 2,052 square foot, two-story residence, including a 535 square foot addition to the upper floor at 62 Granada Drive.
I second the motion.
Commissioner Bundy?
Aye.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Vice Chair Metcalf?
Aye.
Chairman Chase?
Aye. Okay, and then, would you please read those appeal rights for the public that may be watching or listening or reading?
So following action by the planning commission at a public hearing or meeting, any decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the town council within 10 calendar days. That appeal form is available at the planning department, and a $300 filing fee is required.
Thank you very much. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
That was
Enjoy your
easy.
home when it's done.
Don't we have butterflies on the planning checklist someplace?
What?
Just kidding.
That friend of Barbara Vossier's used to come in and have a drawing on the front that looked like it was a Disney cell. You were looking for the rabbits hidden in the grass and butterflies and stuff. And it was in every one that he did, and these are homes that are like the minimum side setbacks, but he has it looking like it's in the middle of a field, and you know the guy I mean.
I know.
I
I
can't
know.
think of his name, but
So-
his look like they should.
I believe that you were the designated survivor of the last town
Yes.
council meeting.
Yes. And I do have some things to say in addition to the actual factual things I think are important. At the last council meeting, one of the things we had was a presentation of age-friendly Corte Madera, their strategic plan that Patty Stolier presented. And you have you got a copy of the book. If you could get, for the rest of us, I'd ask Patty to get some for us. It is 192 pages, I think. They put together a plan with pictures, drawings, renderings, besides charts. They did it. They didn't hire consultants like the other towns did for about $10,000 apiece. And it's something you and Adam and I should take a look at as we look at putting together our design review plan. It shows what can be done. And as I say, plus the fact it's very informative and interesting, the things that, the projects and stuff they're doing for seniors, because if you're not there already, you're going to get there. All right. The other thing on it, okay. Todd Cusimano mentioned that, as in fact, it took place today. The council had an all-day retreat for strategic planning. They started 8 in the morning. I don't know when they finished. I'm saving that other thing for last. The sanitary district. They had 2 3-month projects this summer, which were kind of emergencies, on 2 streets, approximately $400,000 each, replacing sewers, and I don't remember the area it was in, do you? Oh, Paradise K.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, it was the Paradise K subdivision.
Unincorporated Tiburon, yeah.
Unincorporated Tiburon, but it's within our sanitary district. And they were 2 major, major unexpected projects. And now to the one that pertains mostly to us. That was very unfortunate. There was a public hearing, which was a continuation of the July 18th public hearing, On an appeal of the Planning Commission resolution and design review and variance application for a home at 141 Crescent Road. Peter and I were there in July, and Peter and I were there once again. I personally found it very ugly in July and not much better the other night. Now, when they came before the council the other night, they had reached an agreement, so it should have been something that was quite easy. It was just a matter of voting upon it. Phil gave his usual good staff report, the recommendations from the planning department staff.
We
was-
don't have that to show on the slide as far as what the house is, okay.
Peter can probably explain it in a minute, but the recommendation was to turn down the appeal, but to incorporate the agreed-upon changes that had been agreed upon by the next-door neighbor and the applicant. And as I say, it should have been easy, it should have been pleasant, and it was anything but. And the first thing I want to say is I went home so upset about it that I actually sent an email to Diane First, the mayor, because when there was the next-door neighbors that made the appeal, the wife did a very nasty attack on Phil, and Diane stopped it and did an excellent job doing it, and I thanked her. And I wrote down what the issues were, because the late Daniel Patrick Moynihan is known for saying, you can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. And this woman had an opinion and very incorrect facts. And she was not going to stop. That hearing went on for probably close to an hour, going on and on and on, even having a list of misleading statements that have been made by the applicant, which means nothing since an agreement's been reached. So all those things go by the wayside. And the reason I am going into this detail, and I'm pretty sure that you'll agree with me, we have an excellent planning staff who work very hard, who do good reports, who explain what they're doing, answer questions that are asked, and do their best to put together all the information. And I, for one, do not want to sit back and see them attacked. Because I'll tell you, if Diane hadn't gotten up, I think Peter and I would have rushed to that microphone and done it. It was very nasty, and it was certainly unfair to Phil.
We're hiring you to be downstairs tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Is she coming back?
No, not
Oh,
necessarily.
I will, no, I'm
Just
sorry.
stay on guard.
You can disagree with things. There are times I disagree on positions are taken. Tonight, Bob did not care for the Schwab thing. He did not attack everybody in the room because he didn't like the design as much as the rest of us did. And Bob wasn't attacked because he wasn't a rubber stamp to what the others said. And there is no reason for this type of behavior. As a fact, Diane wrote back to me that night. They didn't finish. I guess I got home. It was, probably after 11. They had a closed session afterwards. I think it was midnight when she sent me the email. And she was pretty wound up about it. And she wanted me to assure the staff, Phil, who unfortunately is not here tonight, is he hiding after that, how much he is appreciated, the rest of the staff is appreciated, and she felt she was speaking for the entire council. But I do hope in some way, we've been pretty lucky at our meetings when people have come and not liked things, but I hope you as the chair or you as the head staff person, the planning director, will stop anybody who starts getting personal. Disagree on ideas, but don't attack people unnecessarily. And
So,
other than that,
was the matter
that is the
resolved?
report. Excuse me?
I just want to know if the matter was resolved, if the council made a,
Yes, what was, The staff report and the resolution, which was distributed at the meeting because agreement had been reached, was to deny the appeal and modify the decision made by the Planning Commission by approving the revised plans, date stamped September 26, which had been agreed to. It should have been 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Well,
Instead, it was an hour of and other neighbors who had had no part of this, who knew, who had never been involved, had been approached by this particular neighbor, and they got theirself into the act too and couldn't appeal because they'd never been part of the appeal.
So how come there wasn't a time? I thought in most instances that type of commentary is time
it
limited.
was time limited, but,
Okay.
and I'll augment Phyllis's comment simply by saying that the neighbor who was raising these objections went to other neighbors and said, there are problems with the application now, I want you to bring it in. Well,
This is after it was all approved and
I,
after.
Adam, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think that those new issues can rightfully be brought before the council, or can they? And that's just
So-
good because if something comes back to us or.
Absolutely. No, it's a good question. I don't want to misspeak, but we've had this conversation about de novo, and it is information that is brought forth at a hearing in which all the evidence should be considered. So my understanding is that it could
Could be.
have been
Okay.
taken into
Yes.
consideration.
But the neighbor
It was about a
who-
tree. It was about
The-
an
but
oak
the-
tree, I'll say.
The neighbor from across the street who got into the middle of it complained that after the July 18th recess, when it was put over, giving them time, and once again, Diane is a wonderful mayor. She's the one who suggested that on July 18th, when there was this going at each other, why don't you try to sit down and talk about this and see what can be done? And as I say, it took a while, but it came to it. But this other neighbor attacked the planning department because claimed that once it was recessed, do you call it, am I using the right word? When it's put over to.
Continued.
Continue to, that new notification should have started, and all the neighbors should have had whatever the time period was, starting with that July 18th recess, rather than going back to the period that started with the approval. I mean, she was rewriting ordinances and laws. And then they brought up a tree that it has multi-boles and complained about it. Whether the whole tree was cut down or if one bowl of the two trunk tree was cut down, and the arborist hired by someone else said, well, if you cut down only one side of it, it's going to die anyway. But they insisted only one side could be cut down. I mean, it had about as much to do with what was going on with reality as whatever's on television tonight.
I want to just ask about staff, and these things come up, and they perpetually come up with many applications. One is that the demonstrability of the view plane was not able to be created in any of the staff reports or any of the photos or anything. We couldn't sit there and say that the view plane blocked by trees on the next property and so forth. You would have to have a meeting there in place to show people that the tree that was coming out was not the issue about view plane, and that, in fact, we were hearing both sides of a coin, that some people wanted the tree, some people did not want the tree. So it's a problem that both sides are spoken of, and somehow the council has to say, all right, what are we trying to get to here? Because these people want a view, and yet now they're objecting to the tree coming out. So they've, on one hand, said, please cut these trees down and trim so we'll get a view, but that wasn't the view problem, and yet then they were objecting to the tree coming out. And, so it's one of these chase your tail around the block kind of things, it's just sort of absurd, frankly. And then she brought up a property line disagreement, and I don't think that anybody actually got that specific point straight, because I think it had to do with the stairs and what she was talking about, where there's a disagreement about the actual staking in the ground and where the stairs are. I don't think it was about the hillside.
No, it was the hillside and
She
the
said that, but
setback.
I don't think that's what she was after. But is the hillside thing straight now in terms of?
Yeah,
do
we were staff's very comfortable with our interpretation.
Yes,
and-
she did
and-
not like the interpretation of
code.
the ordinance. And she claimed that because she thought there should be a 7-foot side setback instead of 5, that the applicant had taken over 2 feet of her property
Well, yeah.
and was building on her property.
So the
I mean,
lesson
it was,
learned here is that we're going to have these kinds of conflicts and these kinds of problems, and we just
Yes.
have to sort of, stick to our guns and get through them, because she was unreasonable, outside the parameters of what is
Yes.
appropriate or even true, and that's just what happens.
All right. Well, I think we should, this is still there's still process
Okay.
left to go through, or possible process in terms of what decision came out of the town council meeting. So I think it's, before
Yes.
saying too much here, I think it's probably better just to leave it at that and move
yeah,
on
well,
with
it's
reports.
important
you.
that, as
Yeah,
I
for
say,
reminding.
people can disagree
No,
on
conduct is, I mean,
facts.
it's good to
And
hear
oh,
from conduct.
the conduct has to do with why we want to be sure there's decorum at meetings, and we want to be sure that you can dislike an idea, you can dislike an issue, you can dislike a design, but don't attack individuals, period. Unless
right,
they're
so then,
attorneys, I guess it's okay.
Was there
then.
anything else you wanted to add to the?
No, I mean, after that part of the meeting, I was rather numb, I'm sure we all were.
So with that said, I don't think I have
Thank you.
anything to add to that set of issues there. Something else, okay. Mr. Wolf, do you have anything you want to
Other
tell us about?
commissioner reports, I don't know if we are not in that habit, but I'd be curious if, Bob, in this conference you're at, or if you
Yeah,
wanted
this
to
was
report on that.
the annual San Francisco Estuary Institute, and they talked about restoration projects as well as adapting to sea level rise. Some projections were greater than the potential, 3 to 5 feet at the end of this century. I was particularly interested in discussions about the levees and being able to maintain and raise the levees, which are protecting this community. And Kelly Crow is really working on with a consultant to come up with a plan on that. And I'm also very interested in trying to protect the wetlands that we have here that have been restored. So there was a lot of talk about restoring wetlands, and I asked a number of people questions about, well, how do we keep the wetlands that we restore? Because if you look at Google Map, you'll see that the Corte Madera Ecological Reserve is scarfing out. In other words, the old levee that was breached is widening. That levee is just going away, and you're seeing just wetlands without a levee out there, but because they're not protected anyway from storm surges, ferry wakes, or sea level rise, there's scarfing, and we're arguing about a 0.63 acre waters of the United States, and we're losing 5 or 10 acres a year of wetlands, and that we need to come up with a plan to protect it. It's not really, there's some proposals for either hardening the outer layer or really armoring with gravel, which is thought may stay in place and protect it. It's difficult because you're not supposed to put anything out there because that's filling the bay. So it was a good conference. I'm going tomorrow. It's a 2-day conference. I learned a lot.
You probably know more than anybody else here. What percentage of Corte Madera is considered floodplain?
Probably at least a third, I would say.
At least a third.
Yeah, so all of the, the interior up to this building almost, or, up to the park, which used to be wetlands, and really everything almost east of 101, with the exception of the uplands, is now, a lot of it's in the floodplain, and if sea level rise, as projected, holds true over the next decade or two, as we see what it's actually doing, more of it's going to be in that floodplain.
I think we actually listed that in our response to a Plan Bay Area 2040 comment letter the council's response
Yes.
to them. I think it's in there, if you want the
Okay,
specific
yeah.
numbers.
The reason I'm asking, and it's something I'd like us to discuss at a future meeting when we have it, is under SB 35, that's that new state law about building the affordable housing without going through the usual local requirements. One of the exceptions is land that's a floodplain.
All right, we'll
And-
discuss it. Let's leave it
Yeah,
at that.
no, this isn't the time to discuss it, but it's something
I
I'd
just
like
wanted to add on
see
to
us
Bob's.
discuss.
Bob, have you been tracking the new competition that's going on in the Bay Area? There's 10 engineering teams that are competing to come up with new solutions for wetland preservation and to deal with global warming and the rise of sea level. It's a
Is it resilient by design? Is that the one? Or?
yeah, resilient by design. Yeah. So
I believe Kelly is putting in a proposal or working to try to get a proposal for these outer wetlands to protect those, which then act as a horizontal levee to
I think
help
they
with
just,
storm
this
runoff.
last week, I think I read, I don't know if it was the Marin IJ, but they actually toured, I think, the Corte Madera and San Rafael wetlands as part of an inclusion into that proposal. So we might see some really provocative stuff coming up.
That
and
would
we
be
might-
good.
It might be an opportunity to let the public know in the future what those results are
Sure.
through our own means.
Great.
But
Kelly Crow has really been the engineer that's overseeing the flood board, is really come up to speed on all the issues impacting the Corte Madera infrastructure that protects us from flooding, and I'm really glad that we've got him on board.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Only one thing to report. I just wanted to give you a heads up, and we'll be making a more formal announcement to the commission and the council and so on, but in anticipation of a public hearing in November for the restoration hardware project or the village expansion project, at this point, actually it's going to happen, but the applicant is going to be putting up story poles as soon as next week. One of the considerations we've talked with the applicant about is they're going to put them up for more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I think it's at least 3 weeks in conjunction with some other informational materials that will be posted at the site, including renderings and whatnot. Rob Eddington from Restoration Hardware has also agreed to sort of take people on tours and so on. The story poles, because they do impact parking out there, and they will impact parking.
at Christmas,
Well, and that's
Yeah.
one of the considerations is our,
might be a good way to prove out whether that
We're
lots of
going-
parking is
well, we're,
functioning.
Yeah.
no, we're going, well, they don't have the gravel lot yet, so but it's intended that, because of the season, we're going to announce this as, this is the time for everybody to go look at story poles. Take your pictures, do whatever you need to do, but this will be the time period, because they won't essentially be able to be up
Forever,
during
yes.
those holiday shopping season. So we will make that announcement.
That's our November,
14 is the
14th.
schedule. Yeah.
and they'll come down right after our meeting?
In fact, they'll come down before the meeting.
Okay.
I think it's 3 weeks starting on next Monday, which is 15th, I believe,
Yeah.
or 16th. So it'll come up through the first week in November, I believe.
Because the store's already sending out Christmas stuff in their
It always,
catalogs.
well,
and, I mean, it
generally,
gets
right
earlier
after,
every
at this
year.
point, it's after Halloween is when you
Unfortunately,
start
they think
ramping
it's-
up for
It's
the
after
holidays.
August 1st. It's
Well, I
getting
know,
worse
it gets
every
early,
year.
So, just, and if you get questions on them, please refer them
Yes.
to me, because there will be, I'm sure we'll get questions, and there may always somebody wants to complain about it, but we have a very legitimate story pole plan. There's
Okay.
obviously also questions about, in this case, given it's a sort of you're not gonna get the typical, you can't put all the netting across, you're not gonna hit every point, because they're still gonna access people underneath the drive
Yeah.
aisles. But they will be showing all the relevant different first level setback area up to the peak height. So it's really about, again, building corners where the location of the structure will be, and the height and the general mass of it. So that's you can anticipate that going up starting next week.
At our meeting where we discussed changing the time we meet, we discussed tentatively that particular meeting, we would start at 6:30 because we expected it to be a long meeting. That's the week you were on holiday.
Fair enough.
So I want to let you know
We can continue, yeah.
that we would do that.
Just that.
And I know you've told me this before, but I want to ask again. What exactly are we doing at that meeting? We're approving,
No, it's a
Right.
consideration.
Right,
We'll,
yeah.
we'll send it out, but it's consideration of the
yeah,
FEIR, well, the EIR, and all of the project applications.
and project applications. Because obviously it has to be okayed by the council.
It's consideration for recommendations,
Yes.
obviously, to the
Yeah,
council. So
okay.
Just to reiterate, the different elements besides the FEAR are what exactly that we must find for?
There's too many to, they're all in the DEIR. There's a very good summary page. But just quickly, I mean, having to deal with the gravel lot, there's the general plan and zoning amendments out there. There will be a development agreement that will come before you. There's the design review, a precise plan and preliminary plan amendments for the village itself. I believe there's lot line, there's several different elements. So,
I would ask that perhaps the CMPD be present and one member,
okay,
for that meeting.
okay.
And are we also going to be discussing the gravel lot at that time?
Yes,
Okay, so that's so it's the building itself in the parking
it's
lot
part of
and
the
the
project.
gravel
It's the entire
lot.
project.
Okay, and they have those drawings too that people will be able to see when they have the,
I mean, I see you as.
because
Well,
they
this
had
is
a
really
whole,
about the story poles. It's
Yeah.
not about the gravel lot. This is,
They
it's an
were
exhibit
here
for the story
calculating,
poles.
I know what I was thinking of. You said they're gonna have some drawings and stuff to be shown.
Information about the story poles, just to basically coach people through how to read the poles that are
Oh,
up there.
okay, all right, because I was gonna say, if they're gonna have drawings of the building, they should, there was a very good layout done for the gravel lot that I saw in one of their things.
Okay, I didn't see this raising. I'll trust your judgment.
So then, for the next meeting, October 24th, that is one that, there's nothing there. I will not be present for.
You will not be, I know, and we did have a request from Commissioner Metcalf to put on some of the rules and procedure
Yes.
changes, and
And the attorney.
so that would be the only thing at this point, I believe, unless I believe that's the only thing at this point that I'm aware of. That, things can always change by, but that's the only thing I think.
Why don't you
We weren't able to
tentatively?
have our normal Monday morning meeting
Yes.
yesterday because of all the other things going on in the Sonoma County.
Were you
and here,
closed?
so.
Yes, they were open.
We were here, it was a limited staff, but
Oh, okay.
we were here.
Yeah, I didn't know, because some
Yeah.
city halls were closed, some
Yeah.
weren't.
So, just
Could
to-
it be, if there's not, an approval on the agenda or something we normally don't have time for. You could give us an update on what's happening with some of the projects we have looked at. It's like, just off the top of my head, the one where the theater is, Scandinavian Designs. Other ones where people have come before us, are like Amy's, where we've done a workshop but not taken any, voted on, to find out, have they come back to you, what are they doing, if we expect to see them, or if there's anything we should know about, things we've approved.
Yeah, I mean, I could do a brief project status update. I
Yeah.
mean, it's something that we do on a monthly, every other month basis through a PDF document and post on our website
Yeah.
anyways, but happy to do that.
I do have a question as to the sign that's on Tamalpais in front of the mortuary that says renovations.
Yep.
So is that something that is going to be an internal renovation, or are we going to review it? Or something?
No, I mean, we don't have any applications at this point for that. So I'll leave it at that. If you have,
Okay.
we've had some informational, I did receive an email from a neighbor about that, obviously, as you might imagine. We have been in touch with I believe at this point there is a new owner for the property, and have general idea of their intent, but it would be something that would come before the commission.
Okay.
So let's not, I really,
Okay.
we're at the report stage, we're not here talking about other projects, and really
just
shouldn't be
wanted to
talking
find out
about
what
other
that was.
projects.
We could ask to have them on an agenda, though.
No, if you want,
just-
if we wanted to, we're not gonna discuss projects with which we don't have any applications, that's for sure.
Oh, no, I
We
was,
can go and review projects for which we do have applications
Yes.
and give project status or update. That's,
I-
I'm fine with doing that.
one of them I'd like to have a status report, it's probably finished, but the one that didn't come before us, that they were supposed to be doing some small addition, the one on Sloan Bailey Street that they ended up, do you know the one I mean, Doug?
30 Mohawk.
Yeah, whatever happened with that, did that ever get done, and was everybody finally happy?
That
Let's
was
not-
finished, that was completed.
It's done, but
Yeah,
happy's
leave
a
it at
different
that.
story,
Right.
right? So that's it. That's not, it's, everyone has their own perspective on what that means, so,
Did it
I'm
get
not-
done the
Phyllis.
way we
let's-
needed it?
Really, we need
Okay.
to stop this.
Okay.
This is the report section, we're not reporting on any,
Okay.
it's not a Q&A, and
So
go
with that
about and
said,
talking about anything.
I would like to move on to the minutes, so that we have two sets of minutes. We have the minutes of September 12th and the minutes of September
Right,
26th.
I have a change on each of them, so if we could do it September 12th first, page 9. I've got to find page 9 here. On the second to the last paragraph, the second sentence, instead of saying, set a precedent for businesses that are not desirable, it should be not as desirable. Yeah, there's a big
I remember
difference.
that, Yeah.
Do you want to do both at the same time or one at a time?
We should do them. Go ahead, give us your commentary on,
The other one is page 4. And I'm looking to see what the heck I wrote. On the motion, it was not quite correct. It was unanimous approval required to continue at 1/2 hour increments hereafter. See where it says unanimous to continue to 11 o'clock? It wasn't 11 o'clock, it was at 1/2 hour
Well, that's,
periods. Well, it could be at 10:30, we could vote at 11 to go to 11:30 if we want.
I thought it was gonna be a hard stop at 11.
That's how, I
It is,
remembered it at a half an hour, it had to be
yeah, I
unanimous.
thought it was a hard stop as well. But
Okay, then, I thought it was the other way, but,
Yeah, unless we want to.
okay,
Damage
then
our
leave it
brains.
as it is, then.
So
We only have one thing where we need unanimity then.
So, then a motion to adopt the meeting minutes of September 12th?
I had one change
Okay.
to the September 12th. So page 4,
Which one?
the September 12th.
Oh, okay.
Page 4, paragraph 7.5. There's a sentence, but the high gable portion on one side is inappropriate. What I was trying to say was the double gable portion that would be on both sides is inappropriate in this location.
So it should read double gable instead of
Yeah.
single?
Basically, what I was saying is they were trying to do double gables on either side, and that second gable is inappropriate both in the location of the site, but also it hadn't been done anywhere in that neighborhood, so it just was inappropriate.
So is there a specific change you're looking at on page 4 to
Where
make?
it says single, he
Well, yeah,
wants double.
it's
use
saying.
double- use
Yeah,
double
it's not the
gable.
one side, because the one side is an existing condition. Basically, it's that they were trying to propose in the design a second gable, and that was what was inappropriate.
Okay, so first line, do you get that, Joanne? First line says, Commissioner Lee commented on the general use of instead of single gable, should be double gable?
No. It's actually halfway through the paragraph.
All right, please
So it
just
says,
specify.
he said the farmhouse style is agreeable, that there are a variety of house styles in the neighborhood, but the high gable portion on one side is inappropriate. All
So-
of them have one gable, so it's that they were proposing a double gable. The double gable,
Well, can you just revise the sentence?
yeah, so, but the double gable portion on both sides is inappropriate in this
Okay.
location.
The double gable portion instead of the high.
Okay,
High, yes.
double.
All right then,
portion
as
on
amended,
both sides,
do we have
okay.
a motion
Move
to,
to approve.
Second.
okay?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Then moving on to September 26th. Any further changes?
Move
Okay.
to approve.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All right, thank you. So with that said, move to adjourn, anybody?
So
Move
moved.
to adjourn.